Tell us about that. What happened?
What happened in the study or what happened to me?
Both.
Both, yeah. Well, in the study, it started back in 2014 when we all were kind of mesmerized by what was going on with Michael Brown, et cetera. And there were protests happening around the country, and I wanted to do something, but protesting's not my thing. I mean, other folks go for it, but it's not my thing. So I went and tried to collect some data, and I thought I was going to be able to show that the police were biased very easily. And I grew up not liking the police, so I just thought this was literally the easiest thing I'd ever done. And a colleague came to me and said, "What are you working on these days?" I said, "Oh, I'm just about to write this great paper showing that the police are biased." And he says, "Interesting. What do you think the police are maximizing? What do you think their side of the story is? What are they solving for? When they go to work every day, what are their set of incentives? What are they after? What are they trying to achieve at work?" And it's something that I had not thought about at all. It was embarrassing. So I made arrangements to figure out how to actually do ride-alongs with the police. And in fact, you guys should do ride-alongs. You'd be good at it.
We're planning to.
Yeah, you should do it. And so here we are on the ride-alongs, and I'm embarrassed to tell you, like, after a few hours, I became the worst police officer you could ever imagine, right? Everyone I saw looked like a criminal, right? Like, I was going around, the cops were like, "You really should not be a cop." Anyway, I did this, and then we gathered literally millions and millions of data points on police use of force. And I, again, thought that this was going to show all sorts of bias. What we found was that in the kind of non-lethal uses of force, so pushing someone up against a car or drawing your weapon on them but not arresting them or pushing them on the ground, those types of uses of force, there are large racial differences. There's real racial bias in those uses of force. In fact, just here in New York, a black person during that time was 50% more likely to have force used on them in any given interaction with the police officers. Crazy, right? But then we also collected data from 16 different cities across the U.S. on lethal use of force, the kind of force used on Michael Brown and others. And that's what the protesting really was about. And in those in those situations, what we found was zero racial differences in police use of force. And that is the part that made people really, really upset, really angry.
Lack of bias made people upset and angry.
Yes, yeah. And so we released those results. And look, I'm skipping over a lot of stuff here. I mean, not only did we think we did a rigorous job in the actual analysis, but then we literally, when we got these very surprising results, hired new research assistants, had them do it all over again just to make sure that they were robust, right? Like I was a little worried about, not worried, but I wanted to be sensitive about putting results like this out into the world because they were also counter to my own beliefs. Yeah, I'd say that for a while, I thought, yes, the world was turning upside down. Yes, there were threats against me and my family, but the interesting part was there were thousands and thousands of emails that came from places like Kansas and Colorado and everywhere across the U.S. who said, "Wow, thanks for actually using data to shed at least some light on this. And I've got the following 30,000 questions, but at least you're bringing real analysis to this question because our cities are literally burning and no one's talking about what the actual facts are. So thank you." And I engaged with lots of people on that dimension. But yes, I was very, very surprised at how upset, fellow academics got. And I naively thought we were in this to actually develop a set of facts. I actually thought that's what tenure was for. I later realized it was for drinking Chardonnay at 10:30 in the morning. But I at that point, I thought tenure was for going after the truth, even if it was unpopular, and that the university was going to protect you from whatever may come of you being a real social scientist. We produced this result. I'm still very, very proud of the work we did, but I highly underestimated the response. So one of the most interesting coefficients in that study to me is that when the police report that a suspect is fully compliant, they were not arrested, and no contraband was found. Nothing went wrong in this traffic stop, as reported by the police. Blacks are 25% more likely to have force used on them, even in those interactions.
Wow.
Right? And so, yes, there's some police departments who've written to me and says, you're saying use of force, but what you really mean is response to resistance. And no, that's not what I mean. I mean use of force here, because even in situations where, again, I can't emphasize this enough, the police report they are fully compliant, right? I took a lot of flack for people saying, how dumb can you be? You use police reports. Well, police are reporting it, and you can still find bias in that data. You can really believe it. See what I'm saying? And so the police report them being fully compliant, and yet there's still a large racial difference in the use of force. So I don't know exactly why that is. We did some very a set of pretty rigorous bias tests. So we actually think there is it's racial part of it is racial discrimination, not all of it. Some of it can be explained also by the behavior of civilians. That also differs, but it can't explain all of it. So I think there's enough kind of not fault, but there's enough both sides of that equation that you described, civilians acting differently, police potentially being biased. We find evidence for both of those. And now the key question is, what can we actually do about it? Mm-hmm. What we try to propose is a way to work with police departments to eliminate this type of bias, because I think it's at the root of a lot of the discontent in Black neighborhoods between the police and civilians. Look, if we admit that some of the racial differences in police use of force are due to bias, and then there's a controversial shooting, it's almost irrational for someone in the community not to believe that the shooting, before you saw this data, right? You'd say, well, on the things I do know, I know there's discrimination. On the thing I can't really observe, I wasn't at the shooting, probably was discrimination. I think this is a point that we don't make enough, but if it's hard to negotiate with the police directly on shootings, right? Hold your weapon. That's hard. Their lives are at stake too.
Yeah. But
on the lower level uses of force, right? Every department I've talked to privately knows that there are things that they can do better on the lower level uses of force that would then garner community support so that we could actually have productive conversations when a controversial shooting happens. There are many ways of making a difference, right? And, I don't begrudge anybody who wants to have free expression and to protest. Great. It's just an economic lingo. It's not my comparative advantage.
Okay.
Right? I am a data nerd. So when I see a problem, my first inclination is not to stand up and protest. My first inclination is, let me get a bunch of data and prove to people why this is what's actually going on here. And, to make real social progress, maybe you need both. And I'm sure some of the people who are out protesting are saying, well, numbers aren't my thing. Great, you do your thing and I'll do mine. But it's not that I have anything against it in any way, shape, or form. It's not just for me. Mm-hmm.